Chapter 101, Skull. The hallway stretched endlessly in my mind. A kaleidoscope of pale beige walls and whispers that pierced deeper than any blade ever could. I could hear the voices circling me again, like vultures waiting to pick apart the remains of something already broken. Monster. That's the boy who killed his parents. He doesn't cry. Not once. Freak. He probably thinks he's better than us with those perfect test scores. What a joke. I kept my eyes down, my fingers gripping the frayed straps of my backpack so tightly that I could feel the rough fabric biting into my skin. It wasn't worth looking up. Looking up meant meeting their eyes, and meeting their eyes meant giving them permission to press harder. Hey, monster! The voice rang out like a whip, loud and sharp enough to freeze my feet in place. My heart sank, but I didn't turn around. There was no point. I already knew what was coming. Darren. Of course, it had to be Darren. He always made it his mission to remind me of how little I mattered. The shove came next, harder than usual. I stumbled, my back slamming against the cold metal lockers with a dull clang. My breath caught for a moment as I tried to keep my face blank. Showing pain was the same as showing weakness, and weakness was blood in the water. What? Too smart to say hello? Darren sneered, his hand pressing down on my shoulder. His face was too close, his breath sour. You think you're better than us, huh? I didn't answer. I stared at the floor, my mind already running through escape routes. None of them seemed good. Darren's gang of 2 goons were flanking him, effectively blocking off my exits. Even if I did run, they'd catch me. They always did. You know what monsters like him do, right? One of them, Tyler, I think, laughed. First his parents, next it'll be us. Yeah, Darren said, shoving me again for emphasis. You gonna murder us next, freak? My lips stayed sealed. Words wouldn't help me here. Words would just fan the flames, make them burn hotter. The trick was to wait it out, to weather the storm. Leave him alone. It wasn't loud, but it sliced through the noise like a scalpel. The air around us seemed to still. I blinked and turned my head, startled by the sound of a voice I didn't recognize standing up for me. And there she was. She wasn't big and she wasn't tall. Just an ordinary girl in a school uniform that somehow didn't look quite as rumpled as the ones around her. Her auburn hair was tied into a braid that looked like it had been done in a hurry, but her amber eyes, those weren't in any rush. They burned, steady and sharp, locking onto Darren with an intensity that made me forget to breathe. Darren laughed nervously, straightening up like he was trying to reassert his dominance. Stay out of this, Emma. This has nothing to do with you. Oh, it does, she said smoothly, crossing her arms as she stepped forward. It has to do with everyone, really. You see, Darren, there's this tiny little problem with what you're doing. It's pathetic. The word hung in the air like a blade over his head. Darren's smirk faltered. What did you just say? He demanded, his voice louder but noticeably less confident. Emma tilted her head, a mock-curious expression flickering across her face. Do you want me to spell it out for you? Or is spelling too advanced for you? I almost laughed. Almost. But the tension in the air kept me frozen. Darren's fists clenched at his sides. Shut up. No, don't shut up, Emma countered, stepping even closer. Explain to me, Darren, how bullying someone half your size is supposed to make you look tough. Because from where I'm standing, it just makes you look like a particularly ugly coward. One of the goons, Tyler probably, tried to chime in, but Emma spun toward him like a whip. Oh, and you, are you just here for moral support? Or do you genuinely think parroting Darren's idiocy is a skill that'll get you anywhere in life? Tyler backed down immediately, muttering something unintelligible. Darren, however, wasn't quite as quick to fold. He stepped forward again, looming over her. You think you're better than me? He growled. Emma didn't flinch. Well, I'm not the one getting sweaty over trying to intimidate a guy who's literally doing nothing but existing. So yes, actually. Ido. For a second, I thought Darren might hit her. But then he cursed under his breath, shot me a venomous glare, and stalked off, his goons scrambling after him. And just like that, it was over. Emma turned to me then, her amber eyes softening just enough to make me feel, I don't know, safe maybe. You okay? She asked. That was the day I met Emma. I woke up with a jolt, my breathing uneven as the remnants of the dream clung to me like spider silk. My head throbbed, each pulse stirring memories I had no desire to revisit. Why did I remember that? I muttered to myself, rubbing my temples, my face scrunched in irritation. Memories of the past were nothing to dwell on. Nostalgia was a drug for people who'd given up on their future, a crutch for the aimless. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't aimless. I reminded myself of that fact, clinging to it like a mantra. The past was a void, and staring into it was a waste of time. I needed to focus on the present, the future. That's where strength lay. I dressed and left my room, walking through the vast, eerily quiet hallways of the Creighton estate. The grandeur of it all, while still impressive, no longer had the power to awe me. Not after spending a few days here. The sprawling halls and tasteful decor were more of a maze than a home. But it was Rachel's home, so I supposed it was fitting. Eventually, I found my way to the dining room, where breakfast was already being served. The table was laden with a ridiculous spread. Fluffy pancakes stacked high, golden waffles dripping with syrup, perfectly cooked eggs, fresh fruit that looked too perfect to be real, and more. It was as if a culinary dream had been summoned into existence. At the head of the table sat Alastair Creighton, his presence commanding even as he calmly read the morning newspaper. He glanced up as I entered, his piercing blue eyes meeting mine. "Good morning," he greeted, his tone warm yet measured. "Good morning," I replied, taking a seat. My eyes scanned the table, but neither Rachel nor Arya was present. I took a deep breath and decided to cut straight to the point. "I've thought about your offer. I accept. What help will I be getting?" Alastair set the paper down, a faint smile curling his lips. "A good decision," he said, standing up. "Since Rachel and Arya are not yet awake, let's get started." Without another word, he motioned for me to follow him. I stood, my curiosity sharpening as he led me away from the dining room and into a part of the estate I hadn't seen before. The hallways grew narrower, darker. Soon, we were passing through a heavily secured section guarded by 3 spellcasters, their mana pressure suffocatingly heavy. These weren't ordinary mages. They radiated an aura of power that exceeded even the professors at Mythos Academy. Each of them bowed deeply as Alastair approached, their deference bordering on reverence. The door they guarded was unlike any I'd seen before. Runes glowed faintly across its surface, their intricate designs thrumming with restrained energy. "What's in there?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "You'll see," Alastair replied. His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a gravity that made my chest tighten. The spellcasters stepped aside, and Alastair touched the door, sending a wave of mana coursing through the runes. The air crackled as the seal unlocked, the runes fading one by one. Even Luna stirred in my mind, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Incredible," she murmured. "That seal. It's not something just anyone could create." Even Luna was impressed. That alone was enough to make my pulse quicken. We stepped inside, the heavy door closing behind us with a low thud. The room beyond was vast, its walls lined with intricate carvings and faintly glowing crystals. It felt ancient, a place untouched by time. "You received an ancient greatsword from Eva Lopez, didn't you?" Alastair asked, breaking the silence. I nodded. "That's a fine artifact," he continued, his voice thoughtful. "But what I want to give you is something even greater. Not an artifact. Something alive." My brow furrowed as I tried to piece together his meaning. "What do you mean?" Alastair stopped in front of another door, smaller but no less imposing. The mana radiating from it was intense, almost suffocating. He placed his hand on it, and I felt the energy shift, responding to his command. "I've heard you have a talent for dark summoning," he said, glancing at me. "Or necromancy, to be precise. Since you're not a pure necromancer, you won't have the time or resources to create an army. But that doesn't matter. Instead, you should focus on 1 or 2 summons that can change the tide of battle." His hand pressed against the door, and I felt a pulse of mana that made my knees weak. The seal began to dissolve, the runes unraveling like threads in a tapestry. "I want to give you your first summon," Alastair said, his voice calm but heavy with significance. The room beyond the door was dark, but I could feel the presence inside. It was ancient, malevolent, and overwhelmingly powerful. "In the north, there was a disaster," Alastair began, his tone shifting. "An arch-lich." My breath hitched. An arch-lich. The words alone were enough to send a chill down my spine. "I remember reading about that," I said slowly. "The arch-lich wiped out an entire city in 2035. 1 million people gone." Alastair nodded, his expression grim. "If I hadn't intervened, It could have grown into a Lich King. The North would have been in ruins. His hand hovered over the final seal. The Arch-Lich was defeated, but its essence wasn't destroyed. I sealed it here to ensure it couldn't rise again. And now, I'm offering it to you. You're giving me an Arch-Lich? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Chapter 102. There were many classes of necromantic summons. At the bottom of the macabre food chain you had your standard zombies and skeletons. These were the bread and butter of any budding necromancer's repertoire. Utterly mindless, shambling husks that moved only because someone, somewhere, willed them to. Like puppets made of old bones and questionable decisions. They were useful, yes, but hardly impressive. Climb a little higher, and you'd find mage skeletons. These were your skeletons with a flair for the dramatic, throwing fireballs and ice spikes with their bony hands. Then came the skeleton knights, stoic warriors clad in spectral armor, capable of wielding aura or utilizing the circle method to cast spells. They were self-sufficient, resourceful, and occasionally a tad too melodramatic for my liking. But above them all, towering like a malevolent shadow over this hierarchy of undead, was the Lich. A Lich was not just another level of summoning, it was a paradigm shift. In the ranking of mana beasts, a Lich was a 7-star minimum. And in this world, a 7-star beast wasn't just strong. It was a creature that had surpassed the wall, the threshold separating the realm of mortal understanding from sheer, incomprehensible power. However, this is different, Alastair said, his tone growing heavier as he led me further into the labyrinthine depths of the Creighton estate. His voice echoed faintly against the ruined walls, carrying an air of gravity that sent a chill down my spine. The Arch-Lich sealed here was once a 9-star beast at its peak. I blinked. 9 stars. That wasn't just surpassing the wall, that was tearing it down, building a throne out of the rubble, and daring anyone to come close. Alastair placed a hand on the sealed door, his mana flaring as intricate runes glowed and shifted across its surface. The ancient seals groaned as they unlocked, the air growing heavy with a faint, oppressive energy. He glanced at me, a faint smile on his face. What lies beyond this door, Arthur, is not a creature but a fragment, an artifact, in essence, of one of the most dangerous beings to ever exist. The skull of an Arch-Lich. My breath caught. Even the mention of an Arch-Lich was enough to send chills down anyone's spine. These necromantic abominations were the stuff of legends, catastrophic entities capable of reshaping entire regions with their dark magic. But this wasn't about reviving the Arch-Lich. Alastair's calm tone and steady demeanor told me that much. The Arch-Lich this belonged to is long dead, he continued. Its life source destroyed, its skeleton scattered, and its staff lost to time. What remains is this, its skull, housing only its mind aspect. No soul, no consciousness, just the pure intelligence and magical ingenuity that made it such a formidable creature. The door creaked open, revealing a dark chamber. At its center was a pedestal, and on it rested the blackened, cracked skull. Even inert, it exuded an aura of immense power. I could almost feel the whispers of its lost intellect, like echoes from a long-forgotten era. "This is for you," Alastair said, gesturing toward the skull. "Not as a weapon, not yet. This is a foundation, a beginning. With this, you have the chance to create something entirely your own." I stepped closer, the weight of his words sinking in. "Create something my own?" Alastair nodded. "An Arch-Lich isn't just a being. It's a construct, a combination of 4 key aspects. The mind, which you now have, the soul, which was tied to its life source but is now gone, the body, which can be any suitable skeleton you choose, and the staff, which binds it all together and amplifies its power. You don't need to rebuild the original Arch-Lich. In fact, I'd advise against it. This is your opportunity to craft something new, something that fits your abilities and vision." I stared at the skull, a mix of awe and trepidation swirling inside me. "So I can choose the components? Build it from scratch?" "Exactly," Alastair said, his voice steady. "The mind is a gift, a starting point. It holds the intelligence, the magical framework, and the potential of an Arch-Lich, but how you bring it to life is entirely up to you. The skeleton, the staff, even the essence you imbue into it, those choices are yours. You'll have to find or create components that align with the kind of Arch-Lich you want to command." "And the staff?" I asked cautiously. "How will I find something powerful enough to serve as its anchor?" Alastair smiled faintly, as though anticipating the question. "The staff is the most crucial piece. Without it, the construct can never reach its full potential. And for that, I'll make you an offer. His eyes gleamed with a mix of challenge and encouragement. Defeat Lucifer in the Sovereign's tournament, and I'll give you an ancient-grade artifact that can serve as the staff. My eyes widened. An ancient-grade artifact as a reward? That was an incredible offer. One that most people would never dream of receiving in their entire lives. Artifacts of that caliber were rare beyond belief, coveted by the strongest mages and warriors in the world. I won't make it easy for you, Alastor added, his tone firm. You'll have to earn it. Lucifer is no ordinary opponent. But I believe you're capable of rising to the challenge. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. The task before me was daunting, but it was also an opportunity unlike any other. What happens if I lose? Then you'll have to find another way, Alastor said simply. But if you want to claim the title of the strongest in your generation, this is your chance to prove it. The artifact is yours if you succeed. I looked back at the skull, the weight of the task settling over me. This wasn't just about power. It was about crafting something unique, something that could stand as a testament to my abilities and determination. And perhaps, it was about proving to myself that I was more than just a piece in someone else's story. This won't be easy, I said, my voice quiet but resolute. No, it won't, Alastor agreed, his expression softening. But nothing worth having ever is. Take the skull, Arthur. It's yours now. And remember, this is only the beginning. The choices you make from here will define the arch-lich you create, and the mage you become. I stepped forward, my hand hovering over the skull for a moment before I picked it up. It was cold to the touch, but beneath the surface, I could feel the faint hum of dormant power. As I held it, a spark of determination ignited within me. This was my task, my responsibility, my creation, and I wouldn't fail. Chapter 103. Now, Alastor said, his voice calm but filled with the weight of a professor on the verge of assigning a lifetime's worth of homework. To truly master necromancy, Mythos Academy will be your best bet. Learning how to create an archlich isn't something you can just wing. This isn't a weekend project. You're going to need to learn a lot of theory, apply that theory meticulously, and then ensure everything is tied together seamlessly. One mistake, and you'll have an oversized skeleton throwing tantrums instead of terror. I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. The process sounded daunting. Archliches weren't like simple skeletons or zombies you could purchase from a black market necromancer's outlet. No, this required finesse. Magical programming, as he explained earlier, connecting aspects like an artist painting on a canvas while also being a code writer debugging an entire system. And, Alastor continued, his voice growing sharper, the hardest part, by far, will be the life source. That's no walk in the park. But, he held up a finger, his eyes gleaming. You've got a powerful advantage in Mythos Academy. Your necromancy professor is not just talented. He's an elite ascendant ranker. If anyone in this world has crafted a lich or knows how to guide someone to do it, it's him. I imagine I'll need to practice on something simpler before aiming for an archlich, I said, already piecing together the logical steps. Exactly. Alastor grinned, clearly pleased with my response. Start with a lich. It's not just training, it's essential. The process for creating a lich and an archlich is similar, but the scale is entirely different. Build your foundation with a lich, and as you grow stronger, that lich can evolve into an archlich over time. It'll grow with you, provided you lay the groundwork correctly. I nodded again. That made sense. Practice made perfect, and when dealing with undead constructs that had the potential to obliterate you if handled poorly, perfect seemed like the minimum standard. As for the life source, Alastor added, his voice dropping slightly, you'll need the heart of a beast. Not just any beast, mind you, something powerful, an 8-star beast at the very least. It must still be beating when you bind it. But don't worry about that just yet. Materials can be acquired as needed. Focus on understanding the theory first, Arthur. Without that, all the rare components in the world won't save you from catastrophic failure. The idea of harvesting a still-beating heart from a high-level beast wasn't exactly thrilling, but his point was clear. There was no use rushing into materials without mastering the art itself. I'd seen enough disasters, fictional and real, to know what happened when you jumped to step 10 without mastering step 1. And, he continued, a warm smile breaking through his usually composed face, the reason I'm doing all this for you isn't just to throw you into the deep end. I believe in you, Arthur. You have what it takes to see this through. I felt a knot tighten in my chest at his words. There wasn't much space for belief in my world, be it the one I left or this one. Hearing it from someone as influential as Alastair felt strange. Motivating, yes, but strange. Oh, and before I forget, he reached into a hidden pocket, pulling out a small black ring adorned with an intricately carved eagle's head. He handed it to me, the cold metal pressing against my palm. This is for you. It's an ancient-grade artifact. I blinked, staring at it. What does it do? Alastair smirked. It's your safety net. This artifact will translate your lich for you. Essentially, it allows you to control the lich without it overpowering you. Think of it as a limiter, one that adjusts as you grow stronger, gradually removing the restrictions and letting the lich use more of its power in sync with your own development. That sounds incredible, I admitted, still marveling at the artifact. It is. Alastair's tone shifted, becoming almost fatherly. And it's a testament to how much I'm investing in you. Don't squander it, Arthur. The path of necromancy is not an easy one, and you'll need every edge you can get. I nodded solemnly, slipping the ring onto my finger. The metal felt alive against my skin, faintly warm, as though responding to my mana. It wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility. Now, Alastair said, clapping his hands, the heavy atmosphere breaking. Let's head back to breakfast before Rachel or Arya decide to interrogate us about where we've been. When we entered the dining room, the smell of fluffy pancakes, warm syrup, and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Rachel and Arya were already seated, the former smiling brightly while the latter waved at me mid-bite. Where'd you two disappear to? Rachel asked, her golden hair shimmering in the morning light as she tilted her head curiously. Oh, nowhere special, Alastair said smoothly, his tone so casual it bordered on theatrical. Just discussing some family matters. Right, Arthur? Right, I said quickly, grabbing a plate and sliding into my seat. Arya squinted at me suspiciously, but Rachel didn't press further. Rachel giggled softly, sipping her tea. Well, as long as it's nothing nefarious. Of course not, Alastair said, pouring himself a cup of coffee with the flourish of someone far too practiced at avoiding direct answers. Now, let's enjoy breakfast before the day gets too chaotic. I couldn't help but glance at the black ring on my finger, its weight reminding me of the task ahead. For now, though, I focused on the pancakes. Rachel and Arya were watching me too closely for my liking, but at least breakfast served as a good distraction. Arya was busy piling an unnecessary amount of whipped cream onto her waffles, while Rachel was eating an orange, the soft citrus scent blending with the rich aroma of syrup and coffee. Do you always eat like this? Arya asked, waving her fork dramatically at the spread of food, as though offended by its sheer excess. This could feed an entire neighborhood back in Avalon. Rachel chuckled, her golden hair catching the sunlight streaming in through the wide windows. We only do this for special occasions, though I suppose Father likes to go a bit overboard. She popped a slice of orange into her mouth and added with a sly smile, not that anyone here seems to be complaining. True, Arya admitted, her voice muffled by the enormous bite of waffle she was chewing. Alastair had already excused himself, leaving the three of us to enjoy the relaxed morning. It was rare to have moments like this, just quiet, simple companionship, the kind where you could almost forget about looming tournaments, political pressures, and the mountain of responsibilities waiting back at Mythos Academy. Rachel turned her attention to me, her blue eyes warm. Arthur, do you have any plans for the rest of the winter break? I shook my head as I took a sip of coffee. Nothing specific. Arya and I will probably head back to Avalon and spend some time with our parents. Then it'll just be preparation for the next semester. Rachel tilted her head thoughtfully, her golden hair falling over her shoulder. You're always so focused. You should take a little time for yourself, you know? That sounds like a trap, I replied with a faint smile. Relaxation doesn't seem to exist in the Creighton vocabulary. Her laughter was soft and melodious, like the chime of delicate glass. Fair enough. The conversation meandered after that, touching on everything from Arya's upcoming academy applications to Rachel's plans for the new semester. She mentioned wanting to spend more time refining her mana techniques, and her voice carried a quiet determination that only deepened my respect for her. After breakfast, the three of us wandered through the Creighton estate gardens. It was a crisp, cool morning, and the neatly trimmed hedges and glowing luminescent flora made it feel like we were walking through a scene from a dream. Arya dashed ahead, marveling at the intricate designs of the estate's floating lanterns, while Rachel and I followed at a slower pace. This has been nice, Rachel said, her tone softer now, almost wistful. Having you here. It feels different, but in a good way. I glanced at her, surprised by the sudden shift in her demeanor. Different how? She hesitated, her gaze lingering on the path ahead. I don't know. Like everything feels a little lighter. Even with everything that's going on, I feel like I can breathe a bit easier when you're around. Her words caught me off guard, leaving me unsure how to respond. Before I could say anything, she flashed me a quick smile and darted ahead to join Arya, leaving me to puzzle over her words in silence. The time to leave came too quickly. Arya and I packed our bags and prepared for our journey back to Avalon. Rachel walked us to the estate's grand entrance, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression a mixture of warmth and something harder to define. Thank you for hosting us, I said formally, bowing slightly. And thank Alastair for me as well. This has been more than generous. Rachel shook her head, stepping closer. You don't need to thank me. I'm glad you came. Arya was already stepping into the car, leaving just Rachel and me standing on the grand stone steps. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me in a hug. It wasn't a quick hug. It lingered, and in the stillness of it, I felt the weight of her emotions. She didn't say anything at first, just held me tightly, as though she didn't want me to leave. Arthur, she finally murmured, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the cool morning air. Don't give up. No matter how hard it gets, don't give up. Promise me that. I swallowed hard, her words hitting deeper than I expected. I promise. She pulled back, her hands lingering on my arms for a moment before she let go completely. Her smile was small, but genuine. Safe travels. I nodded, turning to join Arya in the car. As we pulled away from the Creighton estate, I glanced back to see Rachel standing there, her golden hair catching the sunlight, watching us until we disappeared down the road. For the first time in a long time I felt grounded, like I was leaving with something more than I had when I arrived. It wasn't just the skull or the promise of what lay ahead. It was the quiet reassurance that, in a world of chaos and uncertainty, I wasn't entirely alone. Chapter 104, Rank 2. Returning to Avalon, I found myself barricaded in my room, surrounded by an impressive fortress of books, scrolls, and digital holoscreens. The content of my studies was dense, dark mana theory, necromantic binding processes, mana circuitry, and something called soul stabilization matrices, which sounded more like the title of a sci-fi thriller than a spell formula. Every sentence I read felt like it was written by someone who hated the concept of simplicity. Why is this so convoluted? I thought, running a hand through my hair. My current understanding of spells and mana was like a child trying to build a spaceship out of wooden blocks, hopelessly outmatched. Even Lucent Harmony, my greatest asset, could barely scratch the surface of these theories. Still, there was no choice but to press on. The skull Alastair had entrusted to me wasn't just an artifact. It was a key to the future, and understanding it was crucial if I wanted to stand a chance in the coming months. As daunting as the task was, it also stoked the fires of my ambition. But for every hour spent grappling with the mysteries of necromancy, I made sure to carve out moments for my family. Winter break passed in a strange rhythm. Mornings buried in books, afternoons spent sparring with Arya or joining my father for guild meetings, and evenings enjoying my mother's cooking. These small pockets of normalcy were precious, but the looming return to Mythos Academy was always there in the back of my mind, like a deadline I could never escape. Eventually, the day came when I had to leave. Standing by the door of our penthouse apartment, Arya looked at me with crossed arms and a faint pout. Try not to get into too much trouble, okay? You attract drama like a moth to a mana lamp, she said, half teasing. Thanks for the vote of confidence, I replied, ruffling her hair. Don't mess up, my father said simply, though there was warmth behind the gruffness of his voice. My mother pulled me into a tight hug. Don't forget to write, Arthur. Or call. Or send a hologram. Honestly, just send anything so I know you're alive. I'll try, I said, and her frown told me she saw right through the lie. With that, I boarded the sleek silver Hyperloop train to Mythos Academy. The journey felt oddly calming, the hum of the magnetic tracks a comforting backdrop as I stared out at the futuristic cityscapes giving way to untamed forests and shimmering lakes. Once I reached the academy, stepping through its grand gates was like slipping into another world. Mythos was as awe-inspiring as ever, tall, shining spires that seemed to pierce the heavens, advanced holographic displays showcasing upcoming tournaments, and students milling about with the quiet hum of competitive energy in the air. My dorm room greeted me like an old friend, the same stark, efficient design I had left behind. After unpacking my things and ensuring the skull Alastair had entrusted me with was securely stored in a heavily warded container, I took a deep breath. Home away from home. The next day, I met Rose Springshaper outside one of the Academy's sprawling training arenas. She was as vibrant as ever, her long auburn hair cascading in waves and her green eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "Arthur," she called out, waving. "Rose," I greeted, smiling faintly. "Back from the tower, I see?" She nodded, practically bouncing on her feet. "Yeah, sorry I couldn't visit during the break. I was training under an elder at the Tower of Magic. They had me working on advanced spell amplification techniques. Really cool stuff, though exhausting." "Spell amplification, huh? Sounds like it suits you," I said, and she beamed. "I'll show you some of it later. But enough about me. How was your break?" "Productive," I replied vaguely. There was no point mentioning the skull or necromantic studies. Those were conversations best left for more private settings. We caught up for a while, discussing everything from upcoming class evaluations to the latest gossip about Class 1A. Rose, as always, was a whirlwind of positivity, and I found myself oddly grateful for her company. She had a way of making even the most stressful topics seem manageable. Finally, it was time to enter the classroom. The familiar sight of Class 1A greeted me as I stepped through the door. Rows of desks arranged in perfect symmetry, the faint hum of mana-powered lights overhead, and a palpable tension in the air as students filed in. Lucifer was already seated, his emerald-green eyes scanning a thick book on advanced battle tactics. Ren sat in his usual corner, stoic as ever, while Jean was quietly sharpening a blade with practiced precision. Rachel waved at me with a warm smile, and Cecilia smirked from her seat, her crimson eyes glinting with mischief. Serafina, as usual, sat with an air of quiet dignity, her silver hair catching the light. As I took my seat, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the coming semester. Between reconstructing the Archlich, preparing for the Sovereigns tournament, and navigating the increasingly complex dynamics of my classmates, one thing was certain: this year was going to be anything but ordinary. Professor Nero strode into the classroom with the kind of authority that demanded immediate silence. His imposing figure, clad in his signature black and crimson robes, was accentuated by the quiet hum of mana that always seemed to surround him. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who had seen and done far more than the rest of us could imagine. Every time Nero entered the room, it felt like the air grew heavier, as though his sheer presence added gravity to the space. "Good morning, Class 1A," he said, his voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of steel. "I trust you all enjoyed your winter break." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the room, though no one dared to speak too loudly. Nero's gaze swept over us, his sharp, silver eyes pausing on each student for a brief moment, as though he were assessing our worth with a single glance. "We begin the second semester with the release of your updated rankings," he announced, his voice slicing through the air like a blade. "These rankings are based on your performance during the first semester evaluations, your practical abilities, and the insights provided by your instructors." The room tensed. Even Lucifer looked up from his book, his emerald eyes gleaming with interest. Rankings in Class 1A weren't just numbers. They were statements of power, potential, and prestige. And in a class filled with prodigies and royalty, the rankings held significant weight. Nero produced a sleek, holographic tablet and tapped on it. A large display materialized at the front of the room, projecting the rankings for all to see. 1. Lucifer Windward. 2. Arthur Nightingale.
3. Ren Kagu.
4. Rachel Creighton. 5. Cecilia Slatemark. 6. Jean Ashbluff. 7. Serafina Zenith. 8. Ian Vizirian. I stared at my name in second place, a mix of emotions swirling within me: relief, pride, and a faint tinge of frustration. I had expected this. Lucifer, as the undeniable prodigy of our generation, was still the pinnacle of talent in this class. But to be second meant I was closer to him than anyone else. "Lucifer retains his position as rank 1, Nero said, his tone neutral but carrying a weight that underscored the significance of the rank. "His performance remains unparalleled, his strength unrivaled." Lucifer leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk playing on his lips. He didn't need to gloat. His confidence spoke for itself. Arthur Nightingale, rank 2, Nero continued, his gaze settling on me. Your strategic acumen and rapid improvement have earned you this spot. But remember, the gap between first and second is still vast. Do not grow complacent. I nodded, meeting his gaze. I understand, Professor. Ran, in third place, remained expressionless, though his violet eyes flickered with what I could only assume was quiet determination. He was a fierce competitor, and I knew he wouldn't take being ranked below me lightly. Rachel Creighton, rank 4, Nero said. Your consistent performance and adaptability are commendable. Rachel smiled softly, though I caught a flicker of disappointment in her golden eyes. She had hoped to climb higher. Cecilia Slatemark, rank 5. Nero continued, his tone sharp. Your abilities remain impressive, but your unpredictability is both your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. Focus. Cecilia's crimson eyes gleamed with amusement. Noted, Professor. Jean Ashbluff, rank 6, Nero said, his gaze moving to the stoic swordsman. Your mastery of the necromancy is exceptional, but you lack versatility. Broaden your skill set. Jean gave a curt nod, his face as impassive as ever. Serafina Zenith, rank 7, Nero said, his voice softening slightly. Your potential remains untapped. I expect more from you in the coming months. Serafina's silver eyes flickered, but she said nothing, her expression unreadable. And finally, Ian Vizirian, rank 8, Nero concluded. Your performance has been steady, but in a class of prodigies, steadiness is not enough. Step up, or be left behind. Ian, ever the optimist, grinned and saluted Nero. I'll do my best, Professor. With the rankings announced, Nero turned off the holographic display and clasped his hands behind his back. These rankings are not fixed. They can and will change based on your performance in the upcoming evaluations and tournaments. Remember, Mythos Academy rewards excellence but tolerates no stagnation. You are the elite, and I expect nothing less than your very best. Chapter 105, End of Year Project. Our seating arrangement shifted like pieces on a board, everyone silently adjusting to the weight of their new rank. The front row now belonged to Lucifer and me, while Ren loomed silently to my left like a coiled spring. Rachel and Cecilia sat behind us, their contrasting energies radiating like sunlight and wildfire. Jean, Serafina, and Ian completed the ranks, rounding out Class 1A in a neat and tense hierarchy. Nero stood at the front of the room, his ever-watchful eyes scanning us like a hawk. He was a man who could silence a room with a raised eyebrow, though today, his expression leaned toward exasperated patience. As you know, we will have 3 practical evaluations again this semester, Nero began, his tone clipped. But they will be very different from what we had last semester. Pay attention. I won't repeat myself. Everyone straightened instinctively. The first practical evaluation will take place during our field trip in 2 weeks, he said, pausing for effect. The second practical evaluation will involve your end-of-year submissions. You can choose one challenging project or goal that matches the standards of your respective classes. This could be anything from mastering a high-level spell to crafting an artifact, as long as it is deemed sufficiently difficult. He fixed his gaze on us, his eyes narrowing slightly. Finally, the third and most important practical evaluation will be the Sovereign's Tournament at the end-of-year festival. This tournament carries the highest weightage. The winner will be crowned the Sovereign and take rank 1, while the finalist will take rank 2, regardless of their previous standing. However, the results of the other 2 evaluations will determine the remaining ranks. Should, for example, 2 semifinalists need to be ranked. I leaned back slightly, processing the information. None of this was new to me. The novel had laid it out in detail. Still, hearing Nero deliver it in his usual commanding way made it feel more immediate. The field trip, though, that was the key. If I played my cards right, I could find something crucial for the Archlich I was building. Schedules have been distributed to your devices, Nero concluded. Make good use of your time. Dismissed. The tension broke as everyone stood. Some left quickly, while others lingered for hushed conversations. I had no time for either. My next class awaited, one I genuinely looked forward to. Necromancy for first years. A niche subject with an even smaller attendance. Jean and me. Jean and I walked in silence to the necromancy wing, our footsteps echoing through the sleek metallic hallways. Conversation was never on the menu with Jean. His stoic nature made small talk as appealing as shouting into a void. It was just as well. My mind was preoccupied with the Archlich project. The necromancy wing had its own peculiar charm or curse depending on your perspective. The air felt thicker here, charged with a subtle hum of mana that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. The walls were a cold obsidian, etched with faintly glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. It was the sort of place where shadows felt alive. Professor Elias Gravemore waited for us in the dimly lit classroom. He was a wiry man with silver-threaded black hair that looked like it had seen one too many nights of neglect. His eyes, sharp and calculating, glinted behind half-moon spectacles. He wore a long coat that shimmered faintly, embedded with enchantments I couldn't identify.
Ah, Ashbluff.
Nightingale, Gravemore greeted, his voice smooth but carrying an edge, like the whisper of a scalpel. Prompt as ever. Good. Time waits for no necromancer. We both gave polite nods. Jean, naturally, remained silent, his expression as unreadable as ever. Let's get started then, Gravemore said, clapping his hands. Ashbluff, I have a task for you. Stabilizing mana pathways in a skeletal construct. Delicate work, but I'm sure you're up to it. Instructions are on the board. Jean moved to the far end of the room without a word, where a half-assembled skeleton waited under a flickering mana lamp. The professor's attention shifted to me. And you, Nightingale, what can I do for you? I'd like to discuss my end-of-year project, Professor, I said. Gravemore's interest visibly piqued. Ah, an eager one. Excellent. What do you have in mind? I'm aiming to create something more advanced. I began, choosing my words carefully. A necromantic construct, but something with complexity. His eyes gleamed with excitement. Splendid. A skeleton mage, perhaps? A fine choice for someone your age. Challenging, but achievable with effort. I hesitated, then shook my head. Not a skeleton mage, Professor. I want to create a lich. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Even Jin's hands froze mid-assembly, his stoic mask slipping for a fraction of a second. Gravemore stared at me, his expression hardening. He adjusted his spectacles slowly, as though giving me time to take back my words. A lich, he said, his voice flat. You want to create a lich? Yes, Professor, I replied firmly. He pinched the bridge of his nose, letting out a long sigh. Nightingale, I hope you realize what you're asking. A lich isn't just another necromantic construct. It's the pinnacle of dark summoning, requiring mastery of mana manipulation, necromantic theory, and soul-binding rituals, all at a level far beyond what you're capable of right now. I understand that it's difficult, I began. Difficult. Gravemore cut me off, his tone incredulous. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. You're talking about creating a construct that requires seamless integration of 4 separate aspects. A life source for the soul, a skeleton for the body, a skull for the mind, and a staff to bind the magic together. Not to mention programming the mana pathways to work harmoniously without tearing itself or you apart. You'd be lucky if you didn't end up accidentally summoning a time bomb with fangs. I know it's a challenge, I said, meeting his gaze, but I'm willing to take it on. Gravemore leaned back against his desk, studying me intently. Why? He asked finally. Why go for something this ambitious when you could accomplish so much more with a simpler project? A skeleton mage would already be impressive for someone at your level. Because I don't want simple, I replied. I've already started preparing for this. I have a skull as a foundation, and I've been studying the theory. I know I'm not there yet, but I have 5 months to work on it, and I'm not afraid to fail along the way. The room was silent except for the faint hum of mana from the constructs in the corner. Gravemore's expression softened, though his skepticism didn't vanish entirely. You're serious about this, aren't you? Completely, I said. He let out another sigh, this one tinged with reluctant admiration. You're either brilliant or completely mad. Possibly both. Fine. If you're so determined to break your brain over this, I won't stop you. In fact, I'll help you, but you'll follow my instructions to the letter.
No shortcuts, no regles improvisación.
If you're going to attempt this, you'll do it properly. A small grin tugged at my lips. Understood, Professor. Gravemore shook his head, muttering something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like, this kid's going to give me an ulcer. Then louder he added, right? Let's start with the basics. If you're building a lich, you'll need to understand the principles behind integrating multiple aspects into a single construct. We'll begin with that next lesson. For now, get back to your seat and start reviewing the mana programming on skeletal constructs. I nodded, suppressing a wave of excitement as I turned to my workstation. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Jean glancing at me briefly before returning to his task. Chapter 106. Nimrin. It wasn't long before the field trip loomed on the horizon, like an impending storm cloud promising both opportunity and peril. My days leading up to it were spent neck-deep in necromantic theory, grim tomes, mana-construct equations, and programming frameworks that would make even the most seasoned of mythos professors sweat bullets. The hardest part of the entire undertaking? My mana. Necromancy, it turned out, wasn't fond of delegation. Every thread of power used to create a lich had to come from my own mana reserves. Not because I was a control freak, though some might argue otherwise, but because of the unique signature imbued into each individual's mana. It was like trying to forge a sword with someone else's hammer. Impossible unless you wanted a blade as brittle as glass. So, no borrowing mana and help from anyone else. It was all on me. Of course, understanding the theory was one thing. Actually making a lich? That was a challenge so far above my current ability it might as well have been lounging on a cloud, sipping a martini, and laughing at my struggles. Gravemore's lessons made it clear. The soul, the skeleton, the staff, each component needed a careful touch, a precise integration of mana that couldn't be brute-forced. The most infuriating part of the process? The life source. The life source was what elevated a lich beyond a glorified skeleton mage. Skeleton mages, while impressive in their own right, were little more than puppets on strings. Their ability to wield mana was borrowed, like renting an expensive car, flashy but not yours. A lich, however, was an autonomous being, a servant imbued with a semblance of free will while still being under its master's thumb. And for that, I needed to give it soul. Soul was what made liches unique. It wasn't just plugging in a battery. It was creating a complex system that could think, adapt, and wield mana independently. Without soul, I'd have nothing but a glorified marionette. But with soul, a lich would be a force to reckon with, one capable of wielding complex magic, evolving alongside me, and becoming the cornerstone of my necromantic arsenal. To create this soul, I needed the heart of a basilisk. Not just any heart, mind you, the heart of a basilisk, one of the mythical creatures of this world. The basilisk was legendary, a being whose gaze could petrify and whose body was steeped in venomous mana. Its heart was a treasure capable of housing the soul aspect of a lich, providing the raw power and metaphysical spark necessary to make the undead summon far more than a mindless drone. Now, ideally, I'd have gone for a dragon heart because who wouldn't? But dragons, unfortunately, were a tad hard to come by. Basilisks were a more achievable goal, though achievable in this case was relative. The task was still monumental and required precise planning. I also had another reason for targeting the basilisk heart. Jack Blazespout. Jack, in the original timeline of the novel, would one day discover this same treasure in Nimrin, a sprawling city in the southern continent. The basilisk heart was pivotal to his rise as one of the greatest human villains, a dark reflection of Lucifer's heroism. I couldn't let that happen. If I got there first, I'd cripple Jack's future power base and take one step closer to completing my lich. The southern continent was no joke. Known as the continent of beasts and bloodlines, it was a wild, untamed land where even the trees seemed to resent human intrusion. The city of Nimrin, perched on the continent's edges, was a rare bastion of civilization amid the chaos. And it was where I planned to steal the treasure Jack would one day claim for himself. "You're going to use a basilisk heart, huh?" Luna's voice chimed in, her tone carrying a faint note of approval. I nodded internally, listening as she continued. "That will work. It's more than powerful enough to house a programmed soul capable of controlling a lich. It will also allow for the lich's future evolution into an arch-lich." Her words were encouraging, but they did little to ease the weight in my chest. This wasn't just a high-stakes game of fetch. A basilisk was no ordinary beast. It was a mythical predator with enough venom-laced mana to flatten half a city. Killing it would be one thing. Harvesting its heart without dying from its residual mana or toxins would be another entirely. Still, the basilisk heart was perfect. I couldn't afford to hesitate. Necromancy wasn't just about cobbling together bones and magic willy-nilly. Creating a lich was, in many ways, akin to forging an intricate puzzle from scratch. The skeleton, the skull, the staff, and the life source all needed to work together seamlessly, each aspect functioning as part of a unified whole. My mind spun with theories about basilisk hearts and the intricate mechanics of necromancy as I boarded the sleek, mana-powered bus that was to ferry us on the first leg of our journey. "Everyone, please board in an orderly fashion," Nero called out, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. "You may sit wherever you like, but keep your behavior professional." The bus was a marvel of modern enchantment. 2 stories of gleaming white metal and runes etched into its surface gave it an almost ethereal glow, like a fortress on wheels that refused to acknowledge the laws of physics. The mana engines hummed softly beneath the polished exterior, a sound that promised safety and efficiency, even against integration rank attacks or a rogue 6-circle spell. It was overkill for a school trip, but then again this was Mythos Academy. Even a misplaced picnic basket might require a Radiant rank mage on standby. Inside, the bus was every bit as luxurious as its exterior suggested. The seats, arranged in pairs, were upholstered in fine leather, softer than the cloud-like fluff that topped my morning pancakes back in Avalon. Polished oak tables stretched before each seat, bearing a small selection of snacks that looked almost too artistic to eat. Small, discreet compartments hummed gently, maintaining the perfect temperature for every passenger's drink of choice. It was transportation that whispered, "You are important, and the universe should be grateful for your existence." I passed row after row of excited students, their chatter forming a low hum of anticipation. As I reached the back, I spotted my fellow Class 1A students. The rear seating arrangement was tailored to fit us, a spacious bench for 5 in the very back and 2 pairs of seats directly in front of it. Lucifer had already claimed the center of the back row, flanked by Seraphina and Jean on one side, with Rachel and Ren on the other. The arrangement mirrored their personalities. Lucifer in the middle of everything, Seraphina and Jean stoic as bookends, Rachel and Ren each occupying opposite poles of warmth and intensity. I spotted Rose nearby, her brown hair cascading over her shoulder as she scanned the seats. I tapped her shoulder lightly, catching her attention. "Come sit with me," I said with a small smile, gesturing to the left side seats just ahead of the back row. Her eyes widened in brief surprise before softening. "Sure, Arthur." We settled in, with Rose taking the window seat. Her curious eyes darted around the bus, soaking in the opulence with a quiet kind of appreciation. I couldn't help but smile. Her genuine interest in the world around her was infectious. Behind us, the quiet hum of conversation between Cecilia and Ian caught my attention. Cecilia's crimson gaze burned into my back more than once, though she hid it behind a veneer of calm when I glanced back. Ian, ever the easygoing balance to her intensity, seemed unbothered. The bus purred to life, gliding smoothly onto the road as we left the academy behind. It was more of a floating sensation than a drive, the mana-powered wheels barely kissing the ground. Outside, the scenery blurred into a tapestry of lush greens and distant mountains, the tranquility almost surreal. As we approached the teleportation gate at the edge of the campus, the mood inside shifted. Conversations hushed as the massive structure came into view. The gate, a towering arch of silver-veined marble, shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow. Runes etched into its surface pulsed in time with the thrum of mana emanating from its core. It was a portal to another part of the world, and for many of us, this was the first time we'd passed through such a marvel. Nero ensured the students were accounted for before leading us through the shimmering gateway. The sensation was indescribable, an instant of weightlessness, as if the universe had briefly forgotten the rules of existence. The world folded in on itself, colors blending into a kaleidoscope of light before everything snapped back into focus. We emerged into a sun-drenched outpost near the southern continent's coastline. The air was warmer here, tinged with salt and the faint aroma of blooming flowers. A bus identical to the one we just left awaited us, its pristine white surface gleaming against the vibrant backdrop of forest and hills. As we boarded again, the landscape unfolded before us in all its glory. The southern continent was a realm of life and vitality, where nature thrived in a riot of colors and sounds. Rolling hills gave way to dense forests, their canopies teeming with movement. Birds with shimmering feathers flitted between ancient trees, their songs weaving a melody that seemed to echo the pulse of the earth itself. Inside the bus, the atmosphere was a mixture of quiet awe and bubbling excitement. Rose leaned her head against the window, her expression serene as she took in the view. Beside her, I felt the same anticipation building in my chest. This wasn't just a journey. It was the beginning of something pivotal, though I couldn't quite name it yet. Lucifer sat behind us, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery, his expression thoughtful. Seraphina had her nose buried in a book, the faint crease in her brow betraying her concentration. Rachel glanced over at me occasionally, her warm smile a quiet reassurance. Run remained unreadable, his violet eyes scanning the room with measured detachment, while Jean seemed content to observe in silence. As the bus wound its way through vibrant villages and sprawling fields, the chatter around us ebbed and flowed. The hours passed in a blur of shifting landscapes until, finally, we crested a hill, and there it was. Nimrin. Chapter 107. The sun had almost disappeared, leaving behind an amber veil of light that stretched lazily across the sky. Nimrin's city lights flickered to life, dotting the landscape with a soft glow. Despite being a bustling hub, the absence of towering skyscrapers gave it an oddly tranquil feel, as though the city itself was a relic of a more grounded era. The massive pyramid dominating the skyline loomed like a sentinel, its stone sides gleaming faintly under the twilight. Smaller villas and five-story apartments peppered the cityscape, interrupted only occasionally by a skyscraper that seemed almost apologetic about its existence. Our bus rolled to a gentle stop in front of a sprawling mansion. The doors hissed open, and we disembarked like a stream of weary travelers, stretching limbs and cracking stiff joints. My back protested loudly, and my legs felt like lead from the long ride. Despite my physical sluggishness, my mind was worse for wear. A foggy haze born of too many sleepless nights spent poring over necromancy theory and mana pathways. I had been running on fumes for the past week, averaging only 2 hours of sleep a night. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I shook my head and forced myself to keep moving. 5 minutes, I told myself. Just 5 more minutes, and I could collapse onto a bed without looking like a complete failure in front of my peers. All right, let's move along, Nero called, his authoritative voice cutting through the murmur of weary complaints. He lingered briefly to speak with the bus driver before turning to face us. Inside, everyone, quick march. The moment we stepped through the mansion's grand doors, a wave of fragrant air hit me like a warm hug. My stomach, which had been passively simmering, roared to life with an embarrassing growl that made me glance nervously at those around me. To my relief, I wasn't alone. Everyone seemed equally bewitched by the tantalizing aroma wafting through the halls. It smelled like roasted spices, rich broths, and freshly baked bread. Like heaven had hired a world-class chef and turned them loose. Nero, ever the shepherd, clapped his hands sharply to regain control of his flock. All right, I know you're all hungry, but let's follow protocol, shall we? He fished out a card and gestured toward the reception desk. I'll call you up one by one to collect your room keys. Once you've got them, head back here and wait until everyone is sorted.
No exceptions.
A collective groan swept through the group, but Nero, to his credit, smiled like a man holding the keys to the buffet kingdom. Don't look so down. Surely you're not planning to eat before cleaning up, are you? At 8 sharp the buffet will open. You'll be free to eat and drink as much as you like, but only if you're cleaned and dressed. So hop to it. My stomach grumbled again, but this time, with the promise of future satisfaction, I ignored it. I retrieved my key and trudged through the mansion, navigating the maze of luxurious hallways. The interior was a masterclass in excessive refinement. Velvet carpets of deep red stretched across the floors, their edges trimmed with golden patterns. Curtains of the same hue framed massive windows, their hems embroidered with intricate dragon motifs that seemed to shimmer when the light hit them just right. Statues of mythical beasts lined the halls, and each was so detailed it looked like it might come to life at any moment. Outside, the lantern-lit garden revealed a tennis court and a football field, both surrounded by lush greenery. After what felt like an eternity, I reached my assigned room. It wasn't just a room. It was practically a miniature apartment. There was a cozy living room, a sleek bathroom with a rainfall shower, and a spacious bedroom featuring a bed large enough to fit 4 people comfortably. While the decor inside wasn't as ostentatious as the common areas, it was still leagues above what I was used to. I stored my belongings in my bracelet, not bothering to unpack anything, and headed straight for the bathroom. The warm shower washed away the fatigue clinging to my skin, leaving me feeling a fraction more human. After drying off, I collapsed onto the massive bed with an unceremonious pomp, staring up at the intricately designed ceiling. A gold-plated chandelier hung above, its crystals catching the soft lighting and scattering faint rainbows across the room. I let out a sigh, my thoughts swirling as I processed the day. The smell of the buffet still lingered faintly in my mind, spurring me to get dressed. Hunger was a powerful motivator. As I made my way back downstairs, the soft hum of conversation reached my ears. I rounded a corner and nearly bumped into Clanna. Her blue hair framed her face like a waterfall frozen mid-flow, and her expression was as unreadable as ever. "Oh, Arthur," she said with a yawn that she didn't bother to hide. "Heading to the banquet?" "Yeah," I replied. "What about you?" "Same." She fell into step beside me, her pace languid. I glanced at her, frowning slightly. "Why didn't you get promoted to Class A? Your grades and combat scores are more than enough." She yawned again, stretching her arms overhead as if the question itself were exhausting. "Oh, that? They didn't want to break the parity. 8 students. Perfectly even number. Besides, Class A doesn't matter. Not to me." Weird, I thought. I guess they thought Luke wasn't deserving since he didn't have a gift. Her nonchalant tone was almost maddening, but I knew better than to press her. Clanna moved at her own pace, and trying to push her was like trying to argue with a river about the direction it flowed. By the time we reached the dining hall, the other students were already gathering. The tantalizing aroma of the feast intensified, and I realized I was far hungrier than I had thought. Clanna gave me a lazy wave before disappearing into the crowd, leaving me to find my seat among my classmates. As I settled into the dining hall, my stomach made its protest known with a low, grumbling roar that I was sure half the room could hear. Thankfully, the buzz of conversation and the clinking of cutlery drowned it out. Not that it made me feel any less like I was hosting a ravenous beast in my abdomen. I really needed food, and soon. My exhaustion didn't help. Sleep had been something of a mythical creature for me lately, a rare and elusive being that I hadn't managed to catch. Overworking didn't even begin to cover it. My mind had been a perpetual battlefield of necromantic theories and mana equations, and while I was making progress on the whole how to make a lich thing, I still felt like I was sprinting uphill through molasses. Just as I was about to shuffle toward the food, Gene appeared beside me, silent and sudden as a ghost. His presence startled me so much I nearly jumped out of my chair. "Arthur," he said in his typical monotone, his expression as unreadable as ever. "Gene?" I replied, nodding politely, though I couldn't help the raised brow that followed. Gene wasn't exactly one for casual chit-chat. "If you want to make a lich," he whispered, his voice low enough to blend with the ambient noise, "form a black star first." And with that cryptic line, he turned on his heel and walked away before I could ask a single clarifying question. What the hell is a black star? I wondered, my mind already running through every necromantic text I'd read. It wasn't something Gravemore had mentioned, and if it wasn't in Gravemore's arsenal of obscure knowledge, it had to be something serious. "Check your spatial ring," Gene called back without even glancing over his shoulder. My eyes narrowed as I rubbed a finger along the ring's edge, mentally cataloging the contents. When I noticed 2 unfamiliar items, a small potion vial and a slim, black-bound book, I froze. Neither of them had been there before. My gaze flicked back to Gene, but he was already blending into the crowd, his stoic face betraying nothing. Later, I thought, forcing myself to shove down the rising tide of curiosity. Whatever Gene had given me, this wasn't the time to start investigating. There was food to eat and classmates to socialize with. Grabbing a plate piled high with an unholy amount of food, I scanned the room for a spot to sit. Rachel caught my eye almost immediately, her golden hair shimmering under the soft glow of the chandeliers. She waved at me with the enthusiasm of someone who just spotted a long-lost friend, patting the empty chair beside her. "Arthur, here," she called, her bright smile practically beaming across the room. I made my way over, balancing my overloaded plate with the precision of a trained juggler. As I neared the table, I noticed Cecilia sitting on the other side of the seat Rachel had saved for me. She glanced up, and to my shock, she smiled at me. Not her usual sly, teasing smirk, but something gentler, softer, almost genuine. It threw me off so much that I nearly dropped my plate. I set my food down and slid into the seat between them. "You both look beautiful," I said, the words slipping out before I could second-guess them. Rachel's smile brightened, a faint blush dusting her cheeks. "Thanks, Arthur." Cecilia's reaction, however, was even more unexpected. Her crimson eyes widened slightly, and for the briefest moment, she looked flustered. The usual smug confidence in her expression faltered, replaced by something that almost resembled vulnerability. Well, I thought, hiding an internal smirk. "Looks like I'm not the only one who can take surprises." But the compliment hadn't been a ploy or strategy. It was the truth. Rachel's golden dress sparkled like sunlight on water, and Cecilia's deep crimson gown radiated elegance. They both looked stunning, and for once, I wasn't too distracted by my own exhaustion to notice. I dug into my food, letting the conversation flow around me as Rachel and Cecilia chatted. The rest of the class of students were scattered at nearby tables, each lost in their own pockets of conversation. Lucifer, ever the enigma, sat quietly at a corner table with Serafina, both of them too stoic to bother with small talk. Jean, predictably, had found a seat as far from the crowd as possible, his back to the wall like some kind of brooding sentinel. Ian, meanwhile, was regaling a group of other students with what looked like a highly exaggerated story about a training mishap. Despite the chatter and the opulence of the banquet, my mind kept drifting back to Jin's words and the mysterious items now sitting in my spatial ring. Whatever a black star was, I had a feeling it was about to make my journey into necromancy even more complicated. But for now, I let myself enjoy the moment, the food, the company, and the rare feeling of not having to run headfirst into the next challenge. I deal with the rest tomorrow, or maybe after dessert. Chapter 108. Professor Nero's voice cut through the din of idle chatter, instantly commanding the attention of every student in the room. His presence alone was enough to silence even the most talkative among us. Listen up, Nero began, his tone as sharp as a blade. Your practical evaluation for this field trip will involve a rather straightforward task. Straightforward, of course, only in concept, not execution. He let the tension build for a moment before continuing, pacing in front of the gathered students. Each pair will be assigned a specific beast to hunt and kill. These beasts have been equipped with a specialized mana detection device. The device will analyze the unique mana signatures of the attackers to confirm the kill. This means no clever cheating, no switching targets, and certainly no sabotaging your peers. Your success is yours and yours alone. The room buzzed with excitement and apprehension. The mention of beasts always added an edge of danger to any assignment, and I could already see some students glancing at their partners with a mixture of relief and trepidation. As for the theoretical portion, Nero continued, you will also be divided into groups to prepare a presentation. This presentation will focus on your assessment of the ecological and magical environments of Nimrin, with particular emphasis on the interactions between beasts and the natural mana flows of the region. Your professors will judge the presentations based on thoroughness, originality, and clarity. With that, he cast a glance over the crowd, his piercing gaze sweeping through us. You've all been paired as per the last practical evaluation, so you already know who your partner is. Make use of this familiarity to plan effectively. And don't waste time bickering. It's unbecoming of future leaders. A brief silence followed his words, only broken by a few muttered whispers between pairs. Now, Nero concluded, I will leave you to prepare and mingle. Use this time wisely. And with that, Nero walked away, his coat sweeping behind him as he exited the room, leaving the students to absorb the details of the task and begin their preparations. Hey, Rachel, I started, lowering my voice slightly. Do you know anything about something called a black star? Her brow furrowed slightly in thought before her eyes lit up with recognition. Black star. That's like the dark mana equivalent of a mana star, she said, closing her notebook. It's a compressed form of dark mana, created by slowly condensing a significant amount of dark mana into a single, stable point within your core. It's incredibly difficult to achieve because it's not just about effort. It requires a deep affinity for dark mana. Without that innate talent, it's impossible. I nodded, digesting her explanation. So, it's basically a conductor of dark mana? Exactly, Rachel replied, her expression brightening. Once you've formed a black star, your dark mana becomes much more potent and easier to manipulate. It's like a permanent upgrade to your mana management, but it's dangerous to attempt if you don't have the right compatibility. Do you have something similar? I asked curiously. Yes, she said, a small smile gracing her lips. It's called a white star. It's the equivalent for light mana. Forming it wasn't easy, but light mana has always come naturally to me, so it was achievable with the right guidance. I absorbed her words, my mind already racing with possibilities. And how long would it take to form something like that? I asked. Rachel's smile turned rueful. That depends entirely on your talent and dedication. For someone deeply attuned to dark mana, it could take days or weeks of concentrated effort. For anyone else, it's likely impossible. I nodded, a determined glint in my eye. Thanks, Rachel. That was helpful. She tilted her head, her golden hair shimmering under the room's warm lighting. Arthur, are you planning on trying to create one? Something like that, I said with a small smile, not giving too much away. Rachel knew me well enough to pick up on the undertones, but she didn't press further. Well, she said, her voice softening, be careful. It's powerful, but it's also dangerous if done wrong. Don't push yourself too hard. I nodded, appreciating her concern, but my mind was already racing, tangled in the puzzle of the black star. Now, the concept of the black star and its counterpart, the white star, finally clicked into place. A mana core, as I understood it, was just a well of mana nestled deep within your body, a reservoir that fueled all magical endeavors. A black star or white star, however, was something far more refined, more deliberate. It was a star, compressed and purified to an extraordinary degree, a conductor of elemental mana that elevated the wielder far beyond the mundane. Compression and purification. That was the key. But therein lay the snag. My connection to dark mana wasn't innate. My affinity for it came entirely from lucent harmony. Without activating it, my dark mana affinity was non-existent, a phantom gift. Which meant forming a black star might well be impossible for me. I may not be able to make it, I thought, the weight of that realization pressing down like a stone. But the allure was undeniable. A black star wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity. If I could compress my dark mana into something that pure and potent, programming my lich would be far simpler. The task would shift from borderline impossible to merely an uphill battle with 1,000 unknowns. A marked improvement, really. So this was Jin's cryptic clue. It all made sense now. The book he left in my spatial ring probably contained detailed instructions, and the potion he slipped in was likely a tool to aid in the compression process. A shortcut for people like me who weren't blessed with a natural affinity for dark mana. Gravemore hadn't mentioned it because logically he wouldn't assume I could make one. He knew my limitations. But logic never had much of a say when it came to ambition. You can do it? Luna's voice echoed in my head, cutting through the swirl of doubts. How? I asked, her confidence in me lighting a spark of hope. There is a way, she replied, maddeningly vague as ever. But first, get the basilisk heart. Then, I'll guide you so that even in your unactivated state, your black star will hold. I paused, dissecting her words. If she was saying the black star could persist even when my dark mana affinity wasn't active, then she knew something I didn't. Luna's knowledge always had its limits. Strangely human, really, but she seemed confident she could solve this. Which meant, first and foremost, the basilisk heart was the linchpin. It wasn't just a piece of the puzzle. It was the cornerstone. Without it, none of this would matter. So, you're telling me you don't know how to make a black star, but you know how to keep one stable after I somehow pull it off? I asked, half serious. Exactly, Luna replied, unbothered by the jab. I can't do everything for you. Some things you need to figure out yourself. It's part of growing, Arthur. Her words had an odd ring of truth to them, but I wasn't exactly comforted. This wasn't a problem I could bludgeon through with hard work alone. If I failed to create the black star, there wouldn't be a second chance. And I'd have to find another way to assemble my lich, an even more convoluted, fragile way. Still, Luna's faith in me was oddly reassuring, even if it came wrapped in her usual cryptic packaging. Somehow, it felt like more than blind optimism. Maybe she saw something in me I hadn't quite grasped yet. Fine, I thought, straightening my back. First the basilisk heart, then the rest. This field trip wasn't just an evaluation anymore. It was the start of something bigger, something I couldn't afford to fail. Chapter 109. As the banquet began to wind down, Nero took the floor once more, his presence commanding enough to cut through the haze of satisfaction that hung over the room like the lingering scent of roasted meats and spiced desserts. You'll receive your beast assignments tomorrow morning, he announced, his voice as crisp as the air in the southern continent's twilight. That's when the real work begins. There was an audible shuffle of anticipation from the gathered students. A few glanced at each other, silently calculating potential pair dynamics and wondering just how challenging these evaluations would be. In addition to your assignments, Nero continued, you're free to explore the city of Nimrin as you wish. This city, while not entirely without risk, is far from the front lines. Treat it with the respect it deserves. But for your safety, you must inform the professors when leaving the mansion. Phones must be kept on at all times, and location sharing with your assigned professor is mandatory. I won't tolerate negligence. The room hummed with murmurs of approval, or perhaps resignation. The rules were hardly surprising, but the permission to explore Nimrin had a spark of excitement to it. The city beckoned with its blend of ancient spirituality and modern mystique, a playground for curiosity and opportunity alike. I let the announcement wash over me, my focus already elsewhere. The Black Star. The thought prickled at the edge of my consciousness like an unsolved riddle, refusing to fade even as the other students began to disperse. I needed answers, or, at the very least, a roadmap to those answers. As I made my way back to my room, the mansion corridors felt longer, quieter, almost meditative. The plush carpet absorbed the sound of my footsteps, and the faint scent of the evening banquet clung to the air. I passed the occasional painting or ornate vase, all exuding an air of wealth so casual it was almost ostentatious. My thoughts churned, circling around the clues Jean and Rachel had provided. Back in my room, I exhaled deeply and sank into the chair by the desk. The smooth, cold surface of the table felt grounding against my palms. I retrieved the book Jean had slipped into my spatial ring. Its cover was unmarked, save for the faint etching of a star, a simple design that belied the weight of the knowledge it might hold. Compression and purification, I reminded myself. That was the crux of it. To form a black star, I would need to condense dark mana into something so dense and potent it would become a singularity within my own body. A beacon for dark mana, a conductor, and a weapon all in one. Of course, it wasn't just about stuffing dark mana into a compact space and hoping for the best. The process was as delicate as it was dangerous. Too much compression, and the mana could backlash, damaging me from the inside out. Too little, and it wouldn't stabilize. The entire concept felt like juggling knives blindfolded while standing on a tightrope above an active volcano. The basilisk heart would simplify the process, Luna had said. But that was still a future problem. For now, I needed to understand the theory. The book, thankfully, didn't disappoint. Its pages were filled with dense text, diagrams, and what I could only describe as mana flow maps. Intricate illustrations that charted how mana needed to move within the body during each phase of the Black Star's creation. It wasn't just a question of skill. Rachel had hinted as much. Creating a Black Star required innate talent for dark mana, a quality I didn't naturally possess. But that was where Lucent Harmony came in. My gift allowed me to temporarily bridge the gap, to wield dark mana in a way that felt authentic, even if it wasn't. If I could use it as a crutch to create the Black Star, Luna promised she could stabilize it, making it permanent. A cheat code, I mused, running a finger along the edge of the book's pages. But one I'll have to execute perfectly. The potion Jean had given me would also play a role, though its exact function wasn't detailed in the book. Likely it was some sort of mana suppressant or enhancer, something to smooth over the rough edges of the process. I'd have to test it later, cautiously. For now, the most I could do was prepare. Understanding the theory was the first step, and from there I could start visualizing the process. If nothing else, I could make myself familiar with the pitfalls, the variables, the dangers. Knowledge was power, after all. Leaning back in my chair, I let my eyes drift toward the ceiling. The chandelier's soft, golden glow filled the room, its light refracting in intricate patterns. I had a lot of work ahead of me, not just on the Black Star but on everything. The Lich, the practical evaluation, the Sovereign's Tournament, Lucifer, every piece was a thread in a web that felt like it was tightening around me. But this was what I signed up for, wasn't it? A challenge. A chance to prove I was more than just some side character in a story I'd already read. Shutting the book, I exhaled again, a slow, measured breath. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new opportunities, and undoubtedly new obstacles. But for now, I'd done what I could. I reached for the light switch, plunging the room into darkness, and let sleep take me. Nimrin's forests, sprawling and ancient, stretched out beyond the city, painted in hues of frost and silence. While the city itself enjoyed a controlled climate, courtesy of advanced temperature-regulating tech, the wilds surrounding it were left at the mercy of nature, or rather, what little mercy nature had. It was a frozen wasteland out there, a landscape where only the strong survived. And we, of course, were expected to venture out and add ourselves to the food chain, preferably at the top. Pragmatism won over vanity as I layered myself in thick boots, a sturdy jacket, and gloves designed to resist the kind of cold that made even mana tremble. Using mana to keep warm was an option, sure, but also a waste of concentration and energy better saved for the actual task at hand. hunting a beast with a ranking high enough to consider most students a light snack. I headed downstairs after breakfast, scanning the room for my partner. It wasn't long before I spotted her near one of the large bay windows, the morning light catching in her silver hair like frost clinging to moonlight. Serafina Zenith, the picture of effortless elegance even in the practical winter gear we'd been issued. Her ice-blue eyes, sharp and crystalline, found mine as I approached. "You saw our assignment?" she asked, her voice as cool and measured as always, though there was a faint edge of irritation to it. I nodded, hands stuffed in my jacket pockets. "A 5-star beast. An alpha, no less. That means a pack." She sighed, her breath visible in the chilly air, even inside. "Exactly. Packs are always a pain. The alpha will be a nightmare on its own, but getting to it without dealing with the rest first? Messy." I raised an eyebrow. "And let me guess, the alpha's not the kind that politely steps out for a one-on-one duel?" Her lips quirked in what could almost be mistaken for amusement.
No.
"It's more the kind that lets its underlings soften us up first before it pounces. Efficient, really. Annoying, but efficient." I hummed in agreement, my thoughts already turning to strategy. "Hopefully, we can wrap this up in 2 days." Serafina's brow furrowed, and she crossed her arms. 2 days would be optimistic. The terrain alone will slow us down, not to mention tracking the pack in conditions like this. She wasn't wrong. The forests beyond Nimrin weren't just cold. They were a labyrinth of frozen trees, uneven ground, and predators waiting for any sign of weakness. The tech-enhanced maps we'd been issued would only go so far. Still, 2 days was the goal. Not because I was eager to impress Nero or anyone else, but because I had other priorities. "I need to finish this today," I thought, a flicker of impatience tugging at my composure. The basilisk heart wasn't going to find itself, and I had a limited window of opportunity to get it. This evaluation was important, yes, but not nearly as important as the long game I was playing. Every moment spent hunting this pack was a moment I couldn't spend working on my larger plans. "Do you have a strategy in mind?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, her gaze assessing. "Not yet," I admitted. "But we'll need to keep it simple. Packs like these are smart. They'll use the terrain to their advantage. We'll have to outmaneuver them." Her eyes flickered with approval, and she nodded. "Agreed. A direct approach will only work if we can isolate the alpha early, but that'll depend on the pack's behavior. Behavioral patterns.
Terrain avantage.
The unpredictability of a 5-star alpha beast. It wasn't just a hunt. It was a game of chess where the stakes were your life, and the opponent didn't bother to follow the rules. The other students were beginning to gather outside, their breath clouding the air as they shuffled about, checking their gear and glancing at their partners. The professors, bundled in their own winter attire, stood near the sleek, mana-powered transports that would take us to the forest's edge. Serafina pulled her gloves tighter and glanced at me. "We'll need to move quickly once we're out there. No time to hesitate." "Agreed," I said, meeting her gaze. Despite her reserved demeanor, there was a steeliness to her. A calm, unshakable resolve that made her an excellent partner for a task like this. If anyone could keep a cool head in the chaos of a pack hunt, it was Serafina. The air outside bit at my skin as we stepped into the open, the world around us a stark contrast to the warmth and luxury of Nimrin's city center. The forests loomed in the distance, a jagged wall of white and gray, as forbidding as it was beautiful. Somewhere in there our target waited. And somewhere beyond that, the treasure I sought for my Lich project. It was going to be a long day. Chapter 110. The forest around us was a frozen labyrinth, a world of whispering pines, ancient oaks, and a silence so deep it nearly swallowed every sound. I'd spent weeks studying necromantic theory and the finer points of dark mana manipulation, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of this hunt. Today, Serafina and I were to face the Alpha, a 5-star beast, the leader of its pack, lurking in a clearing near a jagged outcrop. We moved as one along a narrow, winding trail, our heavy boots crunching over brittle leaves and broken twigs. The cold was relentless, the air thick with frost that clung to our skin, but I barely noticed it. My mind was already tuned to the challenge ahead. Every step, every pause was a calculated move in the grand game of survival. At the clearing's edge, the trees parted to reveal a vast, open space. There, illuminated by the fading light of dusk, stood the beast. It was enormous, its fur a chaotic tapestry of ice and shadow, its eyes burning with molten amber fury. Around it, its underlings circled warily, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed ritual. A small device affixed to its hide pulsed faintly, silently registering our mana signatures. There could be no doubt. This creature was the Alpha, and its strength commanded respect. I crouched low behind a large boulder, taking a moment to survey the battlefield. My mind raced through countless calculations, every variable meticulously logged. The slopes of the ground, the scattered boulders, the glimmering patches of ice, and even the subtle drift of the cold wind. With lucent harmony pulsating in my veins, I could access the full breadth of dark mana, and, indeed, all 11 elements. But today, I needed nothing but the raw, unadulterated force of dark magic. I'd already activated my gift, and it surged within me now, deepening my affinity with the darkness in a way that felt both exhilarating and perilous. Seraphina's voice broke through my concentration, low and urgent. "Arthur, look, the outcrop there. We can funnel it through that corridor." I followed her gaze to a massive rocky protrusion rising like a natural rampart from the ground. The terrain, rough and unforgiving, would serve perfectly as a choke point. "Good," I murmured. "We'll use the outcrop to our advantage. I'll lure the beast toward it, and when it's isolated, I'll strike." I edged forward, every movement deliberate. The forest's ambient mana, chaotic and ancient, seemed to swirl around me in quiet support. I knelt briefly to feel the chill through the damp earth, calibrating the angles and distances in my mind. In that moment, my thoughts became a single, clear directive. Use dark magic with precision, manipulate every factor, and let the environment amplify my power. I extended my hand and began the incantation, a series of complex gestures that would focus my dark mana into a single, compact orb. It was as if I were drawing on every scrap of theory and every lesson learned from sleepless nights and endless calculations. The orb grew in size, swirling with a concentrated, inky darkness that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. No grand claims of stars or ancient artifacts, just pure, raw power channeled through the lens of lucent harmony. "Seraphina, now?" I hissed softly as I released the orb from my palm. It streaked through the cold air with unerring accuracy, its trajectory calculated to intercept the charging Alpha. For a split second, time seemed to stretch. The orb sailed, a dark comet against the twilight sky, and collided with the beast's massive shoulder. The impact was titanic. I heard the beast's roar, a sound of pure, primal fury, and the force of the blow sent shockwaves rippling through the clearing. The Alpha staggered, its amber eyes widening in shock and pain. The orb had done its work, but the battle was far from over. Seraphina moved quickly then. With a graceful flick of her wrist, she conjured a wall of crystalline frost along the eastern edge of the clearing. The barrier rose in an arc of glistening ice, narrowing the space and forcing the beast toward the rocky outcrop. Its underlings, confused by the sudden change in their environment, hesitated at the perimeter, their movements faltering. "Now's our chance," I murmured, rising to my feet. I took a moment to recalibrate, channeling the full spectrum of my abilities. With lucent harmony surging within me, I tapped deeper into my dark mana reserves. My mind raced with equations and angles as I prepared my next move. This wasn't merely a brute attack. It was an orchestration of forces, a ballet of calculated violence where every element played its part. I advanced slowly, every step measured and deliberate. The beast, recovering from the initial blow, turned its massive head toward the source of the disturbance. I could see its eyes burn with renewed fury as it began to push forward, its movements more cautious now, as if it sensed that its control was slipping. I raised my hand, feeling the dark mana swirling at my fingertips, and began a second incantation. One that called upon not just raw power, but a delicate balance of control and precision. I envisioned the rocky outcrop as an amplifier, a natural conduit for the destructive surge I was about to unleash. My arms moved in fluid, practiced gestures, drawing intricate symbols in the cold air that glowed briefly before fading into nothingness. In that moment, every piece of my training coalesced into a single purpose. I focused intently, my dark mana compressing into a pulsating surge, and then I released it. The energy exploded outward in a calculated blast, a wave of power that raced along the contours of the outcrop and slammed into the Alpha's exposed flank. The force was tremendous, an eruption of mana that seemed to distort the very air around us. The Alpha's roar reached a fever pitch as it was driven back by the impact. The beast staggered, its massive frame shuddering as the surge of dark power hammered into it like a sledgehammer. I watched, heart pounding, as the creature's momentum faltered, its underlings scattering into the trees like frightened shadows. For a moment, the clearing was bathed in a heavy silence, the only sound the labored breathing of the fallen beast and the distant whisper of the wind. I pressed forward, every step bringing me closer to proving my strategy had worked. My eyes swept the terrain. Every patch of frost, every jutting rock, every shadow, and I knew I had to act before the creature could recover and rejoin its pack. "Seraphina, freeze its legs completely," I shouted, my voice barely audible over the lingering echo of the impact. In response, she moved with lightning speed. Her hands danced through the air, summoning a final, precise burst of ice that enveloped the beast's hindquarters. The creature's legs stiffened, encased in a shimmering prison of frost, halting any hope of further movement. It roared in frustration, the sound reverberating off the rocky walls, but the barrier held firm. I stepped forward, drawing my sword with a fluid motion that was second nature to me. It wasn't just a weapon. It was an extension of my will, honed through years of relentless training in both blade and magic. I felt every muscle in my arm coil with anticipation as I prepared to deliver the finishing blow. I began to channel dark mana through loosened harmony once more, feeling my affinity for its surge with a newfound intensity. The darkness around my hand deepened, gathering into a concentrated column of power. I could almost see the lines of energy, the intricate patterns of mana flowing in perfect synchrony with the beat of my heart. It was as though the very essence of my being had been sharpened to a fine point, ready to pierce the veil of life and death. With a final, decisive motion, I advanced toward the beast's vulnerable flank. My sword arced gracefully, its blade cutting through the cold air as I struck with calculated precision. The impact was cataclysmic, a cascade of dark energy and shattered ice that sent the alpha crashing against the rocky outcrop. For a split second, the world held its breath as the beast crumpled, its roar reduced